prior to the recess, there were two questions requested by Senator Lim Chaco. One was to the primary author on the question, of course, of the impact to the budget, and you have responded by basically saying that the more appropriate person to probably respond to that would be DOA or BBMR. The second question was the fact that the standing rule that says that any bill that's being considered shall not contain more than one subject matter and shall not contain unrelated topics pertinent to multiple projects, and that particular language is in 2 GCA section 2108. Similarly, on section 6.01 of the standing rules, it describes germane matters as those that are related or pertaining to the same projects. And 6.01 general rules, it says, excuse me, one subject matter, no bill introduced, considered, or passed by E. Legislature Guam or any of its members shall contain more than one subject matter and shall not contain unrelated subjects or pertain to multiple projects. When sometimes our rules are not necessarily very clear, even further, we would use the Mason's rules. And section 401 of Mason's legislative manual provides that, and I quote, to determine whether an amendment is germane, the question to be answered is whether the amendment is relevant, appropriate, and in a natural and logical sequence to the subject matter of the original proposal, end of quote. So the matters then discussed in Bill 362, as described in the title and legislative intent, all relate to a single subject, real property taxes, and more specifically, the fair and efficient assessment and collection of real property taxes. The four main provisions in the bill specifically include extending the deadline to adjust assessments based on real property exemptions, using TIN for the efficient collection of real property taxes, the prompt removal of real property tax liens used in the collection process, and the sale of tax sold for non-payment of real property taxes. These provisions all relate to or directly amend provisions of Chapter 24, entitled Real Property Tax, of Title 11, Guam Code Annotated, and are logically treated together in the same bill. In light of the above, the provisions of the substitute bill are naturally and logically related to the fair and efficient collection of real property taxes and may be considered germane. Note, however, that the sections of the bill added by the committee are not expressly reflected in the title and should be done on the floor as a floor amendment or technical amendment prior to consideration of the bill on third reading. And I will make sure then that I would provide a copy of the standing rules, and then the GCA as well, and as well as the remarks that or the statements that I provided. So therefore, on that particular question, then is that yes, that the matters then discussed are related to that one single subject area. So, Senator Lim Tiaco.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the thorough clarification. So you know, it makes sense, and I won't belabor the point. But going back to the response on the first question, though, regarding the impact of the exemptions, would that therefore require a fiscal note for the bill? Because it does have a financial impact, specifically on a budget that we have just recently passed, as it pertains to real property tax, future forecasted or potentially rolled into that budget, what real property taxes may have been calculated in there. And if BBMR or DOA is the right people to answer that question, maybe we should therefore put the bill aside and get the question answered. I don't know if we want to go as far as going into the committee of a whole, or maybe sending the bill back to committee so that we can get those questions answered and make sure that there is no financial impact, and then we can proceed with the bill.
Normally, the procedures would be that for just about really every bill, it would be sent to the director or the acting director at the time. We're looking at the date here of BBMR requesting for fiscal notes on a certain number of bills, and in a letter that was submitted by COR, that this had gone to the acting director of BBMR requesting for fiscal notes 359 through 367, and of course, speaking to this specific bill, is that then they had not sent down, at least I'm looking throughout the committee report, if they had submitted a response of any impact. They had not, and the only thing, of course, that I saw would be just the testimony of the Director of Revenue and Taxation, who submitted written testimony in support of the bill. So that's basically all we have. Prior then to compiling the report, is that if none is sent from BBMR, then normally the waiver would be provided by COR at a reasonable time if the government did not respond.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, if we could maybe just consider setting it aside so we could either get one of the two, either the fiscal note from BBMR, if we don't get that, the waiver from CORE, and then we proceed. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I'm going to defer to the author of the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have no problem actually going to committee of the whole and calling BBMR down here. I think it would be great to find out whether or not they were factoring in these exemptions on their projections of real property taxes, or if they were actually hoping that people wouldn't be able to claim those exemptions. I would love to get a solid answer on that. So if a committee of the whole will move us forward and get us those answers, that's just fine. But as you clearly stated in the procedures, we already requested the fiscal note. They didn't provide one, so we're supposed to get the waiver as a result of them not providing one. If there is none in the committee report, I'll be more than happy to follow up with the Committee on Rules just to make sure that we have that for the record. But if that would suffice to move us forward, a committee of the whole, or just having the waiver, that's fine. But I would be concerned about referring it back to committee only because it's already October. If we're wanting people to take advantage of this exemption, we now only have a 3-month window up until the end of the calendar year. And so the bill would require that the Department of Revenue and Taxation provide a public notice in a newspaper of general circulation. It posts a notice on the mayor's offices. So I don't want to cut short either the ability for our people to be properly notified. So I'll follow up with Committee on Rules, and if we need to go to Committee of a Whole, that would be fine too. But referring it back to committee is something that I would not be comfortable with.
So I think the request is not to send it back, but to set aside until such time then that we'll be able to, either by you or COR, to secure then the fiscal note, then, you know, or some comment from them that.
Or the waiver of one from.
Yes, or the waiver. It would not lose its place in the order of the agenda. So, and you'd have no objection to that?
No objection. Thank you,
Okay.
Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Senator. So, moving along, let's see. Okay. To 398, Mr. Vice Speaker, on Bill 398. 384. Why am I saying 398? I think I need a new pair of glasses. 384.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill 384-32 on the third reading file and ask for an opportunity to speak.
Yes, you may proceed. I just wanted to make sure that the clerks have a particular document. But on your motion then to place 384, and you're going to briefly discuss it.
Yes,
And
thank
may
you very much,
proceed.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, about 5 years ago, when I introduced legislation to increase the tobacco tax, it was really for one main purpose. And the purpose was to make it unattractive, to dissuade people from picking up smoking because of the health effects that have been documented by study after study after study, which shows that cigarette smoking kills more people in the country than murder, cancer, and HIV, AIDS. I mean, it's unbelievable that as a country that we've not placed it on Schedule I controlled substance because of its deleterious effect on the health of the community and the cost to the community. Unfortunately, there's a huge industry built up around this, and nobody wants to touch it. So the only thing that we had at our disposal was to make it painful, to make it cost money to be able to buy the cigarettes, so that you would no longer have what we had at that time with $3 packs of cigarettes, which made it very easy for young people in school to use their lunch money to do it. But when the price went up to $7 and $8, it became more difficult. I had family members that I would go to parties, and they would literally, in front of other members of the family, cuss at me and threaten never to vote for me again because of the fact that I made cigarettes so expensive for them. And I've even had experiences where when I was flying back to the States for a period and landing at Los Angeles, everybody that was flying back to Good Samaritan for cancer treatment or heart treatment at Good Samaritan, and the medical referral office van was there to pick them up, they would all just glare at me because of the cost of the cigarettes that they had to buy on Guam and the cost of cigarettes, and they would stop outside the van to have a cigarette before they got back in, before they were taken to the hospital for their treatment. It's an unbelievable drain on this economy, the amount of money that we spend on it, and the reason why the sin tax was initially introduced was for the very purpose of dissuading people from smoking. Fortunately, it has. It's now dropped a little bit. We're no longer the top in the country. We've come down some. Even smoking among young adults and children on island has gone down. It's still high, but it has gone down a little bit. When we passed the initial legislation, I made it clear that I was hoping that at some point in the future there would be no money being received by the Healthy Futures Fund for cigarettes. The Healthy Futures Fund was not intended really for all the other good purposes that we've now made it used for. Yes, it's great that we're using it to pay for cancer education, cancer treatment, cancer assistance, but we're using the same money that we got because of what caused many of those people to get the cancers that they're suffering from. And it'll never be enough to cover the cost. But that, as a preface, Madam Speaker, was the reason for the increase in taxes. A few months ago, I ran into a distributor who provided me with copies of invoices of other distributors on island who were figuring out a way that they could continue to get people hooked on cigarette smoking. This person showed me copies of invoices where cigarette distributors on this island were having the mom and pop store buy and pay for 10 cartons of cigarettes, and in exchange for paying for the 10 cartons of cigarettes, they received 6 free cartons. I'm not sure whether or not the 6 free cartons had the tax levied on it before it left the warehouse. I haven't figured out how Rev and Tax does this. But it was 6 free cartons. And so I imagine if you report that I sold 10 cartons of cigarettes, that you would pay for the tax for the 10 cartons of cigarettes. But the fact that you did not receive money for the 6 cartons of cigarettes, you probably wouldn't need to report it. I'm not sure whether or not this is a way that they're circumventing the statute. But whatever it is, it's a promotional aspect. And when I initially wrote this legislation, I provided it to the American Cancer Society, and they sent it to their national office, and they sent me back this legislation written this way to try to address this. And it wasn't until they sent me back the proposed legislation as I've introduced here in 384, and they then provided me with a report that showed that the tobacco companies, after advertising, the biggest expense for running any of those companies, R.J. Reynolds and whatever the names of the other big tobacco companies are, the second largest expense for the operation of those companies is promotion. Even more than the cost of manufacturing, advertising and promotion cost way more than the cost of production. But it was for the purpose of luring more young people into smoking and making it cheap soon after I saw those invoices. One of my staffers was out at a mom and pop store and brought me back, I showed it at the public hearing, packs were two packs of cigarettes were strapped together with a thing, 2 for the price of 1. The intent of this legislation, Madam Speaker, is twofold. One is to try to get back to what the original intent was for increasing the tobacco tax, was to make it less attractive and expensive if you were going to decide that you were going to take that habit up and cause this community increased medical cost. And so the way that this legislation is written, that no business engaged in the manufacture, production, distribution, or importation of tobacco products, or any employee or agent of the same, shall sell or otherwise provide or distribute to retailers or consumers any tobacco tax without charge or for less than the listed or non-discounted price in exchange for the purchase of other tobacco products. And the definition for listed or non-discounted prices means the higher the prices listed for tobacco products on its package or price listed on any related shelving, posting, advertising, or display at the place where the tobacco product is sold or offered for sale, plus all applicable taxes, if such taxes are not included in the stated price and before the application of any discounts. We're not prohibiting discounting. You can discount if you want, but we can't go with this. Buy one, get one free. Or pay for 10 cartons and get 6 cartons for free. So that when you sell the 10 cartons, you can make up the loss or the cost by selling the additional six cartons, which you didn't have to pay for. Madam Speaker, we really need to try to care for our young people. And the cost, the increased cost, and even earlier when we increased the cost of chewing tobacco, we've assisted our young people because we were noticing when I introduced that legislation, you guys, oh, God, the smell of this thing disgusts me. We were noticing at the mom and pop stores next to the schools that the children were now buying snuff rather than buying cigarettes because it was cheaper. Well, now that they're both the same price, it's usually too expensive for them to be able to get it. And so we're seeing the reduction. I'm hoping that at some future date we'll be able to deal with one of our other colleagues' legislations that relates to vaping because of the continued addiction to nicotine that results from that. But this one is just to address the issue of making sure that the initial intent of the legislation we passed for the increase in taxes was to make smoking unattractive because of the cost. And so I ask my colleagues' support in this legislation. Thank you.
You're welcome. On the motion, does anybody would like to speak? Senator Lim Tiaco?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I certainly agree with the retiring speaker on several points, and one is that we really should do maybe not what is necessary, but what is prudent to educate people on the effects of smoking. From a health perspective, you know, I would discourage anybody out there that is considering it not to do it. If you're smoking now, try and figure out a way to quit. My brother was a longtime smoker. He finally quit, and you can just see the physical effects of it. He's just has so much more energy. So I definitely wouldn't be a proponent of smoking, but this bill goes too far into the management of the free market. I don't see where this body or any legislature or lawmaker for that matter should figure out ways to manipulate the market forces. Let people need to decide for themselves on certain decisions that they make. A decision would be not to drink and drive. That's a smart decision. A smart decision would be not to pick up smoking or not to continue smoking. A good decision would be to quit smoking. But why are we regulating what those decisions for those people should be? And if they choose to do it, that's their prerogative. Now, yes, we should do whatever we can to educate them on the effects of it. And I think that the tobacco industry has, with Congress, U.S. Congress, has gone a long way in educating society on the effects of smoking. And I would say that smoking has decreased. But this bill isn't about that. This bill is basically determining how vendors, how wholesalers or retailers should market their product, or I should say not market, but sell their product. Whether they choose to give discounts in any form or fashion is up to them. Leave it up to the businesses. Why would this body choose to regulate that? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to delve in or try to create any laws that would otherwise allow businesses to conduct their business. This isn't necessarily an issue about decreasing or making it less attractive to young people to stop smoking. This basically goes into determining how a business should sell their product. And for a business person and for the business community, that would scare me. Whether it has anything to do with tobacco is another subject altogether. What if this were to manifest in other forms, and we start basically determining how businesses should sell their product throughout the market? It just doesn't make sense. Now, prior legislation on the taxation of it and using that money for the Healthy Future Funds and to educate people, okay, you know, that starts to head in the right direction, but this bill doesn't. This bill doesn't do that. This bill basically tells a business how they can sell or what they should do to sell their product. Even the retiring speaker alluded to, yeah, go ahead and give discounts. Well, what difference does it make on how the businesses choose to give those discounts, whether it's in the example that he used or in any other form or fashion? That's not for us to regulate. It's not for us to legislate. That should just be left to the free market and to the businesses to decide on how they want to do that, Madam Speaker. So I definitely don't rise in disagreement for the speaker, for the retiring speaker, for the most part, as it relates to the health effects of smoking. I'd be the first one to tell any current smoker out there to stop smoking. It's for the betterment of your health. But this bill doesn't necessarily address that. It tries to address it in regulating businesses, but that's not what this legislative body should be doing. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, Senator San Nicolas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I agree with both retiring speakers. I think that we need to know where our limits are in terms of how we're going in there and tinkering with the free market. But we also need to understand what the whole intention is behind the bill and what it's trying to accomplish. This bill, if this bill was going to dictate whether or not a business can give a discount on a product, I have a problem with it. But where I do have a problem on the other side of the coin is that when you do a buy one, get one free, you're basically having one package of the product escape taxation. It's escaping the assessment of the tax on the sale of the item. And when that escapes the taxation, basically the whole purpose of that taxation is to offset the cost that the use of that product is bearing down upon our community. And that cost comes in the form of health expenses that the government has to pay for the medically indigent program and through Medicaid. Or it's the cost that comes with people having higher health risks and therefore raising insurance premiums. That tax is supposed to either discourage the use of the product, or collecting that tax is supposed to go towards offsetting the cost of that product being used and all of the societal impacts that it has on the community. So when we do a buy one, get one free, and that's all this bill is trying to accomplish here. It's just trying to stop that buy one, get one free type of selling of these products. And the reason why we need to regulate that is because when you're giving one of the products away, it's escaping the taxation that would have offset the effects of those products. Now, if we were going to go out there and say, oh, you can't give a 10% off or 25% off of a regularly listed, individually packaged item, then that's something that I would agree with as getting too far into the free market. But we do see, if you buy something in the store, and I'm sure all of us have seen it on packages, where you'll see a package of something, and then on the bottom it'll say, not labeled for individual retail sale, which means that the manufacturer is saying, you're not supposed to take this, break it into pieces, and sell them as individual parts. And so as a government, what we're saying is that these packs of cigarettes are not supposed to be packaged and sold and discounted so that they can be escaping the taxation that's supposed to be offsetting the cost to society. So I agree with both retiring speakers. There is a limit as to how far we should dare go when it comes to tinkering with the free marketplace. But I also believe that it's incumbent upon the government to make sure that we're not allowing for taxes to be escaped that are necessary for offsetting the detrimental impact of the products that are being marketed and sold. So I do rise in support of the bill. If there was anything in this bill that I thought was limiting the ability for a business to properly discount their product without factoring in the escape of taxation, then that would be an issue for me. But this here is actually preventing the full escape of taxation from a product that's being bundled together on a buy one, get one free basis. And that is something that we need to be on top of. And it's only good for the health of our community going forward. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. On the motion, I have Senator Respicio.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I certainly am listening to the discussion, and I agree with all three retiring speakers in as much as the mover of the bill has always made it very clear that the increases of the tobacco and alcohol taxes are to prevent this kind of behavior. And so this monies that are being paid are being used to fund tobacco and alcohol cessation programs, but more importantly, to fund prevention and education programs and do similar things throughout this island. And so in reading the bill, I know the main sponsor made it clear that we're not trying to regulate free enterprise, and we're not trying to determine how these vendors can, what price they can sell their products for, But more importantly, we're trying to prevent the example of buy two, get one free. So as the previous speaker pointed out, that it circumvents the payment of these taxes. So I offer an amendment that will maybe move this discussion further to add a new paragraph which says, nothing in this act shall be construed as a prohibition on individual sales of tobacco products at a discounted rate, provided, however, it is not attached to a sale of another tobacco product at a reduced price or even as a giveaway. And so I think if we think about what I'm offering and support the amendment, we're making it even more clearer, as the main sponsor said. He doesn't want to tell store owners how much to sell their packs of cigarettes for, but he certainly doesn't want the distributors of these tobacco products to get away with not having to pay for the sin taxes. And so the whole idea is to discourage the people from partaking in the alcohol and tobacco, in this case the tobacco products, and then you have programs where you have buy two, get one free. I think that kind of just encourages the behavior and goes against the grain of what previous legislatures have tried to do in this regard. So I've written the amendment out, and I offer this now as a new paragraph to Vice Speaker BJ's Bill 384.
On the amendment, Senator Lim Tiaco.
Madam Speaker, just by definition alone, a tax is assessed on something that's levied on the cost of goods sold. So if you're giving it away for free, I don't understand what tax escape is being referred to, because they're not paying for it. Now, some are going to argue that yes, they're paying for it in the form of the first packet that they paid. Okay, fine, but still, nonetheless, the second pack is being given away for free. But still, one of the issues that I wanted to also raise, Madam Speaker, is nobody's even considering what type of black market that this type of legislation, this type of interference with the free market is contributing to. Everybody's turning their head to it, except for the author of the bill, because he in his statements he had mentioned that there certain mom and pop stores are being invoiced for one and selling it for another, or being given proceeds. That's the black market right there. All of those are escaping taxes as well. Think about where people are going to go to get their cigarettes as well, and what impact that would have on the black market. You could go into if you were on a short trip to Saipan, you could go into duty free and buy them all out, right? But nonetheless, it doesn't negate the fact that this type of legislation, this type of interference in the economy into the free market only goes to create the black market. It only drives it further underground, and it only further makes it easier for the same intent that the author is trying to achieve. There's now not only are these potential children have access to it, they have access to it through this black market. So just a couple of thoughts, Madam Speaker, that the demand's not going to go away. The focus should be on education. Like a lot of the legislation from Congress has come out about the anti-advertising on TV and the focus on education. All this bill does is not only interrupt the free market process, but also just drives it into a black market, and then all of those sales escape taxation.
Vice Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the comments made by the retiring speaker, because that is exactly what we're trying to get to. The fact that you're not selling it, quote unquote selling it, because you're giving it away, there's no escape tax. The intent of the legislation at the very beginning was for every 100 cigarettes brought into this island, that there was a tax for that. For every pound of snuff, there was a tax for that. And that should have been levied at the very beginning, and it shouldn't be escaped by saying, well, you know, I brought in 50 cases of cigarettes, but I only sold 20. Well, what happened to the other 20? Well, you know, I gave them away. You can't ask me to pay for the other 30 cartons, cases that I gave away, because I didn't collect any money from it. But I used it to be able to lure all the little kids at the schools, outside of the school campuses, to start smoking cigarettes, because by giving 6 additional cartons to the mom and pop store, they can sell their cartons of cigarettes, their packs of cigarettes for $3 or $4 and not lose money. And the statement that it's inappropriate for a legislature to get into this kind of thing, the retiring speaker mentioned one other. In cigarettes, this schizophrenic country of ours, with all the free speech that we talk about, won't allow cigarette smoking and cigarette advertising. Why? Because though we're schizophrenic about whether or not we are opposed to the tobacco industry, the fact that in the states, many of the states need the industry, but we don't need to advertise, or at least not for the Super Bowl or for the World Series. There was a period where they weren't even having people smoke in movies. But that's because we refuse to address the issue head on. The real thing should be that it should be listed as a Schedule I controlled substance, because it kills more people than anything else.
What is that noise?
But the fact that it drives an industry, we turn a blind eye to it. All I'm trying to get, Madam Speaker, is one, to make sure that we don't escape any taxes, and 2, we make it so that it's expensive enough so that young people and other people are dissuaded from starting the habit. But by allowing for promotions where they get to sell you 10 and you pay for 10 and you pay the taxes for 10, but you get 6 free and not have to pay for the taxes because it wasn't sold, avoids the whole intent of this. And that was the statement that was made. That's exactly what we're trying to address. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome. On the motion, Senator Nicholas. Canceled? Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on the motion? I'm sorry. Let me see. Yes, Respicio's amendment. Senator Respicio, you want to close? So I'm trying to remember now whether that was an objection, Senator Limchiaco. You didn't say whether, no. So on the amendment, the Respicio amendment, no objections, so ordered. On the, back to the main motion, Mr. Vice Speaker, you want to close? On the motion then to send 384-32 through the third reading file with no objections, so ordered. Bill number 388, Senator McCready.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to make a motion to send Bill 388-32 down to the third reading file and discuss.
Okay, is it, let me just real quickly check, is it as introduced, there's no substitute? Okay, so as introduced.
As introduced, yes.
Yes, so you may proceed, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 388-32 is an act to add a new article to 6 of Chapter 77. And it's the issuance of tax credits for contributors to the renovation and expansion of the Teton Gymnasium. Madam Speaker, we have a tremendous opportunity before us here today. Passage of this legislation would mean that the basketball players and young adults alike can possibly base their hopes on a bright future. Now, these infrastructure challenges which our athletes face today are cross-party line problems. They are not partisan party line. The legislature is the last stand, this legislature that is, for these young athletes. They are Guam's future, and they epitomize hard work, dedication, teamwork, and they also have been bringing back medals to our island. Now, a lot of times people come up to me and say that we reached a point in time where our people have changed, but I don't believe that, Madam Speaker. The majority of our people continue to be hardworking taxpayers. They go to work, pay their rent or mortgages, and just like myself and members of this body, we have simple needs. What has changed, Madam Speaker, is the world around us. And these decisions that we make in regards to this piece of legislation will have a long-lasting impact because these worlds around us is changing. And everywhere you look nowadays, there's more crime, more problems, and just as the retiring bill and the retiring speakers spoke about, this is the opposite. This is health and wellness of not just the basketball community, but our entire community. This is infrastructure that we so desperately need for early childhood education, early childhood development, teamwork, health and wellness, and a model piece of legislation that should work throughout this island. Madam Speaker, during the public hearing, we had overwhelming support of this piece of legislation. And if you look at the committee report, I know some of the questions were asked by some of my colleagues about the structure of this piece of legislation, and those questions are answered in the committee report. Some people in this body have probably used the Teton Gym when it was in its heyday. Many people in here have probably used it, but it doesn't get used anymore because it's a dilapidated facility. We have, through this piece of legislation, through a public and private partnership and these tax credits, an ability to bring that gym back to life, to give this community a boost, and to give our basketball community a fighting chance when they compete with higher level competition. Madam Speaker, it's happening as we speak. On Saturday at the University of Guam Fieldhouse, the Guam national men's basketball team is taking on a professional team from the Philippines. These things will help us. It will help move our island forward when it talks about health and wellness and when it talks about sports. And every parent who pays taxes, Madam Speaker, deserves the right to send their kids or their loved ones or their aunties and uncles to a facility that is safe and strong and vibrant and is sustaining. And I think this piece of legislation does just that. So I ask my colleagues, Madam Speaker, to support this piece of legislation, to give our island youth a fighting chance at health and wellness. Madam Speaker, I'd like to add some people to the bill as well. I'd like to add Senator Chris Duenas as a co-sponsor. Proper an amendment, I would say. Senator Chris Duenas, Senator Elena Machida, and Senator Mike Limtiaco. And Senator Dennis Rodriguez and Senator Frank Uggan. Thank you.
Rodriguez
If
and-
there's no objections.
Wait, Rodriguez and who? The last one
Senator
again?
Frank Ogden.
Hogan. On the amendment, no objections, so ordered. We're going to take a brief recess. Legislature is back in session. Senator McCready, I know there was a question on the title and the land ownership. Can you, would you be willing to set it aside while we wait for Gita, Director, to bring the document down?
Yes, Madam Speaker, we will have the documents sent down, and so I make a motion to put it aside and hear it right after we get the documents.
Thank you. So no objections ordered. Do I have my bill? Okay.
Madam Speaker, you recognize on Bill 393.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a motion then to place Bill 393-32, COR, which is relative to expanding the borrowing authority of the Guam Memorial Hospital for the renovation of the labor and delivery ward to the third reading, and I'd like to spend some time discussing it.
Any objection? Hearing none. You recognize, ma'am.
Okay. Let me see. I need to get all my notes together here. Okay. How should I start? Actually, a tour arranged by Senator Yamashita to the labor and delivery room took place a couple of months ago, and several of us had attended and did the tour around the hospital, specifically the labor and delivery ward. And as we were touring, of course, doing a walkthrough, several points were stated in terms of the fact that that particular area or the hospital itself for the last 25 years had not gone through any renovation, but more importantly is the fact that when mothers who are in labor and are there to deliver, and upon delivery, of course, many times that these mothers had to move 5 times to 5 different parts of the ward. And it becomes very, not just cumbersome, but it's very emotional for mothers and babies and the fathers who are there, of course, to welcome in the new child to the family. In addition, because the setup of the hospital is not, the ward is not necessarily maximizing full utilization of its facility, but at the same time, excuse me, is that there were a lot of wasted space. There's ways to rearrange it. There's also rooms where there are no privacy whatsoever, and the only thing that separates two families, two mothers, will be just a cotton curtain. And so, like I said, there's just no privacy. And of course, your fathers have not gone through this at all to truly have an appreciation to mothers who are going through labor, is that you really have almost no control over what's going on in the process, because it is the baby and the body that is determining the extent of the labor, the pain. And at that point in time, putting aside all shame or embarrassment or what have you, they're totally out the window. And imagine then the next person next to you, the bed next to you, that only a curtain separates you. For a first-time mother baby, could be a terrifying experience. And so in reviewing that, of course, we really walked away realizing that, something needs to be done. This is a ward in which every day, of course, mothers are coming in. Every day, a new life begins there. And it is also a ward in which, because, I mean, we have, babies being delivered every day, so it is fully utilized. So in returning, many of us have expressed that something really needs to be done. We wanted to do something. The question, of course, is how we're going to be able to do this. And so putting a bill together is the easy part. The harder part is being able to identify, of course, a funding source to finance this. And it's always been, the rule whenever we put bills before these bodies, we must identify a funding source. Now, at that time, there wasn't a funding source, primarily because whatever individual reserves or reservation of revenues under a specific fund had been already reserved for other purposes. What then became available, and it didn't come available until this budget year, this new fiscal year, or rather starting today, the new budget for the fiscal year came into law. And what that did, because in that particular budget law, I had an amendment basically then making sure that the business privilege taxes that were on reserve to pay for Public Law 31-76 for all of the school renovations, and including T.1, that there was going to be, the BBT tax reservation, the 1% of that. That then became available because the debt obligation now for all of the renovation of our schools, including Simon Sanchez High School, will be a result of Public Law 32-120 and 32-121. And the bond obligation for that will come from the Territorial Education Facilities Fund. So with all those things really needed to come into place then to be able to make the BBT now available, that was in 31-76, now available then for this appropriation, and that's the funding that I've identified for this bill. What we've done here is that then, so that's the monies that is being identified, a fund that's being identified. Now, there are many various ways, of course, in which the government can do this. And when I say the government, it'll be the government. It is not Guam Memorial Hospital. So I want to make that clear. Guam Memorial Hospital is not the one taking out this particular loan to do the renovation. It's the government of Guam. And what we wanted to do was to, and the governor said that the other day in his press release, is to give him different, alternatives, other ways to be able to do this, and there are, and we did that, intentionally did that, because we want to make sure that when Gita goes out and does this, is that then they'll find the best formula, they'll find the best methodology, they'll find the best financing office to go to, or financing programs that are available. So one of them would be like a line of credit, which the Guam Memorial Hospital had actually done previously, and it was a short-term loan which they're able to go out and borrow and draw down. So that was one. Secondly, one of the things we wanted to make sure too is that, so that we can make sure all of the monies go to the hospital, is that there wouldn't be any charge to be levied by the lender for making the loan. The third is that we wanted to identify that in their negotiation that we want to be able to, of course, again, which is a good time, and we've heard this with other departments and agencies who've gone out, is to keep the interest, of course, really low so that then, of course, we can yield more monies with what it is that we're getting. So aside then from the line of credit, there's a revolving loan fund that could be used, a municipal lease financing. There could be another option of a direct loan. And also included, and this is the interesting part here as well, is that to be able to allow for the government, if you look on page 3, the alternative financing, where they can also do a federal guaranteed loan or community facilities loan and grants. And this is with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And there was an official who was here, as a matter of fact, a month ago, and I had mentioned this, and he said those are the kinds of loans that they like to look at for hospitals, for universities, for, more for, the community type things other than what GURA is offering. Then the municipal lease financing, which Gita has actually done before. And that's all listed, like I say, primarily then for the government to look at what would be the best way to then go out and get monies for, to be able then to build this facility. Now, initially when we were discussing this, we were talking about, I know, just the labor and delivery ward, and so many discussions were evolved as a result of that. And then I know you were concerned that in the public hearing that we were at 4 million, then a discussion of 7 million, and then of course there was the 12 million. And I know Mr. Verga had said that they would be looking at the 7 because they were looking at possibly working with the front office, the governor's office, to then be able to use compact impact monies, which is at the discretion of the governor, to be able to make their 12 million. Now, I know that several of our colleagues here are having some heartburn in terms of what the final dollar amount will be. And the way then, although the way the bill was written for $4 million, it was written for a short-term loan of 10 years. But when we heard the number of 7 million, then we did some crunching of the numbers to amortize it to get up to 7 million. And it can be done still with the same amount of the pledge of $600,000 as for the debt obligation, that you can amortize it then up to 20 years to be able to get $7 to $7.4 million. So that's one way to do that. And I like to, discuss this then and allow our colleagues to participate in this discussion, when I get to that particular section. So in short, that's what this bill will do. But there are some amendments that I really would like to offer to, of course, strengthen the bill and make some corrections as well. So the very first one will be then on page 1, where it says section 1, but it's line 1, that it is not W, the small w, but rather V as in Victor. So if I may, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make that motion to correct that.
On that first amendment offered by Speaker Juan Pat, any senator wish to speak or object to the amendment? Any objections? There being none.
Thank you very much. The second amendment, and I know this would generate some discussion, and that is, of course, as I stated earlier, that in the original form, as introduced, is that it is for $4 million. And my amendment, of course, is to get the discussion going to, I'd like to hear from our colleagues, is that if to then increase it to $7 million. That's my second amendment.
On the amendment to 7 million, Senator Rodriguez, then Senator Nicholas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker. First of all, if I could use this time also to just thank the good speaker for and our other colleagues for finding a way to provide the revenue to provide funding to renovate the labor and delivery room at the hospital. However, you know, when you take a look, and I think before we even go further in trying to increase what it is we're trying to get them over there, I think, and I stepped out for a little bit, but I caught the tail end of the author speaking about how this legislation does not require the Guam Memorial Hospital itself to pay for this loan. But you know, if you take a look at the title alone, it's expanding the borrowing authority of the hospital. If you read through the legislation as well, it speaks about the authority entering into negotiations with a bank or a lending institution. And so maybe I think if we can get just a clear indication of who is going to pay for this, because just you know, earlier in the year, or was it last year, this term, we had provided an expanded borrowing authority for the hospital to pay off existing vendors who provide medical and pharmaceutical supplies at the hospital. And so I think we need to know for sure who in fact is going to pay for this. Because the way I read it here now, it seems like, you know, my sister and her family are trying to get a personal loan, but then I'm the one going in there and negotiating it for them. You know, and so it seems that way. I know I heard the speaker say that it's not the hospital, but I think it needs to be indicated even before we go further in trying to increase the amount that's being borrowed.
Madam Speaker, do you wish to address that?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. The hospital, even though we're saying when we authorize them, this it primarily means is that because the hospital is directly under the governor based on the Organic Act versus the Department of Education where it says it's the government. When you look, and I said earlier that the obligation is not coming from any of the revenues that the hospital receives or may generate for that matter, that it is actually the business privilege tax, and the only one that is authorized to do that again on behalf of the government of Guam, on behalf of the hospital, will be GITA. So it's not the hospital, and the bill is clear on page 2 where it says there that it be collected from, of course, the business privilege tax, excluding some of these others that we've gone through to make sure that we don't touch those other provisions. So it is. But if I can work with legal counsel to make sure that then maybe becomes clearer, but it's because we know for a fact is that they can't, because they can't obligate. None of us and no other department and agency can go and obligate the government. It's the government, GITA, who will when they go out.
Does that satisfy you, Senator Rodriguez, or would you recommend that we take a short recess to have the speaker and legal counsel?
Yeah, I don't wish to delay the discussion further, but yeah, I would take that as working with legal counsel to make it very clear, because as we know that we can't put another burden on the hospital's finances,
All right,
even though we know it's
take a
something
very
that needs to
short
be done.
recess.
Thank you.
Well, Senator Snickles. No, we're back on the record.
Just making sure I'm not talking during recess. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I fully support the moving forward of these projects. It's one of the few times where I can support some borrowing, because I do understand that the return that we're going to get from this is going to be much greater in the form of more services being rendered by the labor and delivery, the entire maternity ward of the Guam Memorial Hospital. It is a profit center of the hospital, so investing money in there to improve the the attractiveness of that as a service option for our people will go to improving the bottom line of the hospital. So we need to support that. My only concern, Mr. Speaker, is with respect to the amounts that we're borrowing and the timing of when the funds are needed, and whether or not we're going to be incurring any interest expenses while we're waiting for the disbursement of the funds or the utilization of the funds for the actual projects. For example, if we go out and we borrow even the initial $4 million without the architectural and engineering specifications being already completed and approved by the board, then that $4 million will be sitting in an account, and while it may be earning 0.25% interest, it will be charged a minimum of 8%, maybe if it was borrowed from a local lender at prime. So we will be incurring interest expense on these monies for as long as they are not being utilized, and even after they are utilized, it's still going to have a cost associated with it, but at least it'll be in the process of generating its return on investment. So I understand that the $4 million will initially go to renovating the labor and delivery ward, and that is phase 2 of the project. Phase 1 was actually going out and getting the architectural engineering specifications done. Phase 2 is the labor and delivery. Phase 3, if I'm not mistaken, is for the nursery, and that is where the $3 million is required for. Now, before we even get to phase 3, we should get over phase 2, and so the initial amount that we're going to need for phase 2 is $4 million. If we borrow the $7 million, even if we get the architectural and engineering specifications done for labor and delivery, we're still going to be sitting on the $3 million, waiting for the money, waiting for the initiation of the project for the nursery. And I communicated with the doctors who service up at GMH, and they made it very clear that this needs to be done in phases, because we can't just completely shut down the maternity ward and not be able to deliver any babies up at GMH. And so because we're going to have to do this in phases and cycle them in and out, we're not going to be able to turn everything on at the same time. And so in order for us to move each project forward, but still keep the maternity ward operating, we're going to need to first do phase 2. And phase 2 is labor and delivery. And phase 2 is $4 million. So for us to increase the amount to $7 million right now would result in us having, at the very least, $3 million sitting there incurring interest expenses without us being able to deploy it until phase 2 is done and until the architectural and engineering specs for phase 3 are complete. So the speaker's very tenacious. We sit right next to each other. We always banter about her tenacity and my fiscal conservatism. But I really think that going for the first $4 million, subject to the architectural and engineering specifications being done for labor and delivery, would be the appropriate first step. I will fully commit on the record to the next $3 million, because I believe that that should be the next step that we take. But before we go out and actually authorize that borrowing, we first need to finish phase 2. And so I would prefer that we, instead of going all the way to $7 million with this bill, we first start with the 4, and we get that project off the ground and underway, and then we make a firm, good faith commitment that we're going to follow through with phase 3. And I'm willing to make that commitment right now. But I'd like for us to first, because we want to make sure we're not incurring interest expense on money that's just sitting there not being put to use, we limit the borrowing from $7 million down to $4 million and get phase 2 out of the way first. So if the speaker will not withdraw the amendment, then I would object to the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Senator Yamashita, your hand went up. Any other senator after Senator Yamashita want to speak on the $7 million amendment? Senator Yamashita, you recognized?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know, thank you for joining us on the second visit to floor 2 of our Guam Memorial Hospital, our Guam Memorial Hospital. Our Guam Memorial Hospital, where our babies are born, where every month 250 babies are born, and 10% of those 250 babies are teen moms. Thank you for joining us on that second visit. On the first visit, I thank the 6 other senators for joining us. And for many of us, it was a return to when our own babies were born. And I saw the same for Micah, the same bed, the same closets, the same toilets. that were there when I gave birth to Ryan and Eric. And for me, what was just really telling was not so much the worn down Formica, the whiteboard that was the new technology 25 years ago, the tape that held things together, the big portable potties that were hidden underneath the sinks. All of that was there, but what was also there were the nurses and the doctors, who were really struck by the idea that we were giving them the attention. And then there were some moms who had just had their babies, and we had the privilege of walking into one of those tiny rooms where the dad was in the bed cuddling his newborn, and squished up next to him was the mommy, who was as proud as can be. And we couldn't all fit, of course, and most of us stood in the hallway and looked, and everybody started saying how they knew them, how they knew their mother, how they knew their father. And it's Guam. We're so blessed, we know. We know each other in so many different ways. We spent 2 visits looking at where our future was being born. And we all walked away understanding that it is time, as a new hospital is being supported in Dedido, our hospital in Tamuning needs help. And as was talked about by the previous speaker, this is just a wise investment. If we can invest in what GMH is so good at, which is bringing babies to life, which is helping parents find the energy and the courage to continue on. In today's wards, you walk into a section and it's a real little hallway where they have these 2 chairs, and that's where breastfeeding is encouraged. Because the beds are so thin, and after giving birth to a baby, you have no energy to hold that baby as you attempt to breastfeed. The rooms are small, they're crowded, they're outdated. It is time to renovate. This investment is the investment that should be happening. It makes a statement that we support our hospital and we support our nurses and our doctors as they welcome our future to this island. The 1, the 4, the 7, the 12, frankly, I would prefer 12, and I'm going to tell you why. The 12 because we already know Madam Speaker found that 1 million, and this body supported it for the design. And then the remaining 11 is to turn that whole floor into a labor, delivery, recovery, postpartum floor, where once the mom arrives, she may stay at one bed until she goes through her labor, and then she gives birth, and then she cuddles, and then she rests, and then hopefully the next day she gets to go home. That is just amazing to think you would go, get checked in to a room one time, and be cared for and supported as you work hard to deliver your baby, instead of moving 5 times. As well, there's a section there, if you go around the corner, to where our neonatal intensive care babies are. And that particular second visit, I think there were 7 preemies there, and where they move the lamps around so that everybody can be warm. And a part of this money is to upgrade that equipment. And Mr. Speaker, it was shared that sometimes our military families need extra support and they go to GMH. Sometimes our surrounding islands, our brothers and sisters, need that kind of special attention, so they come to GMH. But GMH should be the place where you want to have your baby born. And if it's going to cost us $12 million to do it, I just think that is just one of the best investments we can make. Now, I understand the concerns about borrowing and the concerns about investment and the concerns about one step at a time. But I also worry about how we get this done, and then in 2 months, things change, and then we don't have the kind of momentum we have right now. Bless you. At this point, I'm not going to make the motion to amend it to 12. I'm thinking somebody else might be doing that. But I am standing in support of what the speaker is amending. And again, and as we keep saying labor delivery, it's even more than that. It's labor delivery, recovery, postpartum. It's a place where our babies are welcomed into the world, where a mother can sit on a bed, lay on a bed, and go through that whole process, where there's enough room where the family can be in there with her if she wants. And then if there is an at-risk birth happening and things aren't going right, then they're taken to a particular room where they have all the needed equipment. You know, Mr. Speaker, in between those 2 visits and up to now, moms will send me pictures of places that the Navy hospital, there's places in the Philippines. They'll show me these, they look like suites. Suites where these communities have decided that that's how they want their babies to enter the world. But they're not suites, they're just updated, labor, delivery, renovated postpartum rooms. Our GMH has taken a beating in all kinds of ways. I think our oversight chair has done an incredible job at standing for GMH, advocating for GMH. The legislature has succeeded in many different ways in standing for our medical community. And yes, we still have a lot more work to be done. And this is one of those things that I think we invest in, we stand proud for, and this helps us grow the reputation, the future, about what is so good about GMH. And it's where our babies are born, where the mothers labor, where they deliver, where they recover, and then they hopefully go home the following day. I stand in full support of what Madam Speaker is attempting to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Tina Munya Barnes. Any other senator after Senator Barnes on the amendment?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, as I totally agree with the retiring speaker and her passion on literally the purpose of this unit within the Guam Memorial Hospital, and how other retiring speakers spoke about how this is also a resource to the hospital. As I was looking over the notes, Mr. Speaker, when we first looked at the needed resources to renovate this unit, we talked about first getting, we got, this August body got them $900,000, almost $1 million for the, I guess the A&E, right? The 900,000 was for the A&E plans, and then they moved right on forward with that. But Mr. Speaker, and maybe I'd like to yield a question to either, I know you can't answer this as the oversight, but maybe the author of the amendment can help me answer this. Was when we were at the public hearing, the numbers were rising for the need to renovate this whole labor, delivery, and recovery, and also including the neonatal. It went from 4 million to 7 million to 9 million, then to 12 million. And unless, because I agree with the retiring speaker, wanting to move maybe even up to the $12 million to make sure that if we're going to renovate it and we're going to make sure that this is right for our patients, then let's do it right this time around. We all know that since the hospital was built, after the 1950s, and just based on what GMH mandates are, we can't refuse anybody. Everybody whose baby was born here, it was either at GMH, and only those who have military benefits and are spouses or military personnel were born at Naval Hospital. And now, within the last several years, maybe not even a decade, we have Sagwa Managua. So my question is based on the conversations we had at the public hearing, were we going to include the funding that was requested from GMH to work with the Department of Interior funds to seek the additional $4 million based on what was originally asked? Because I do know that the numbers change, and you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Madam Speaker, will you yield to that? There's
Or
also
you can answer it.
there's also a board resolution that's included in the minutes. It was the last thing that was added that was sent by the board last week. That should answer how it got to 12.
So I don't need to answer then. 'Cause you're
You
right.
may.
The resolution, of course, did indicate that, and even in the testimony that Mr. Berger had given, is that they were going to use the first appropriation of $850,000 for the A&E design, and then secondly, the $3 million for the renovation and for the, I guess, fully furnishing, the labor and delivery millions. It brings it up to $4 million. And they were saying that beyond that, then they wanted to request through the governor, through OIA, will be to get compact impact monies to be able then to address the stage 3 of the renovation. So that $5 million was really going to come from compact impact, and we were then supposed to be able to provide for the funding of up to $7 million. That's my understanding from that time, and the resolution, I know we've just received a packet right now that's being distributed, and I'm reading that as well, that came, I guess, along with the fiscal note.
Mr. Speaker, if I may, I don't have the resolution here, but I just want to make sure, I don't have it here. From the board you said, because I want to make sure that based on her answers, that, because I have no objections moving up to $12 million to support a full renovation and completion, because if we're going to do it, let's do it right. So can I just have 30-second recess? So they can
Recess.
show me?
Legislature's back in session. Senator Tinamuni Barnes.
Thanks, Speaker Cruz. Looking at the Board of Trustees official resolution of 14-72, I just want to thank you for giving us that brief recess so we can get a copy of this official resolution. And it notes that in one of the whereas clauses, in order for GMHA to complete the phases of both Phase 2 and 3 of the Guam Memorial Hospital's labor delivery and recovery division, then it would need a total of $7 million. And the reason why they note that in one of the whereas clauses is that the $7 million loan amount added to the fiscal year 2016's Department of Interior's request for the $4 million plus the $895,813.77 already approved through the public law that we did earlier with Public Law 32-179 amounts would equal up to the $12 million. So now that that is clarified, the amendment that the good speaker spoke about was to increase the amount in this from the $4 million to $7 million, because we've already had two other previous public laws that included the amounts. So, and the last passage being Public Law 32-179. So I'm in support of this amendment, and I thank the good Speaker Wampat for adding this amendment to Bill 393. Santa Mosi.
Thank you. Any other senator wish to be heard on Senator Toniata? Senator Tomata after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the author of the legislation would yield to a question. And you know, this has been going back and forth since the public hearings and so forth on the cost. And like you said, we went from 1 million, 3 million, 4 million, 7 million, now we're at 12 million. And they're looking and looking at it. I'm looking here at the cost breakdowns. 4 million for on phase 2, 4 million for 3 million for renovation services, 1 million for FF&E package. You know, what is the cost? What is the breakdown for square footage, and how many square feet are we actually renovating in the labor and delivery and maternity and nursery? So you know, how many square feet are we actually renovating that is costing us $12 million?
Madam Speaker, do you yield?
Because I do recall that second floor, that's where the labor and delivery is, also with, I think, the operating rooms and ICU on that whole wing. So, I mean, how many square feet are we actually looking at renovating for $12 million?
I wish I could give you an intelligent answer, but, you know, I have to respond with EQUA. Because I know it's the whole floor, that area there, because I know we went to 3 different places. As a matter of fact, we went to another level where the labor and delivery, then we went down where the women were recovering, and then a little bit to the right, there was the nursery for the children, and of course it included the equipment. So I really don't know what the square footage is, and we're only going on the basis of what they have given to us here.
Thank you. Senator Toniata.
Yes, and that's my concern here, is that, you know, we really don't know what we're looking at with the renovation cost and square footage, and how GMH or even how the administration up there had come up with the cost of going from 1, 3, 4, 7, and now $12 million. It's just concerning that here we are, we're looking at getting $12 million to GMH for renovations and furnishing fixtures and equipment, but yet we don't know how big of an area we're actually renovating for the ward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Senator Tom Adda.
Mr. Speaker, I share the same concern of the speaker before me. I guess when this discussion first started many weeks ago, it started out with a ticket of a price tag of $2 million. Went from 2 to 4 to 7, and then just now 12. But then last week, I think it was in the paper that they have actually $46 million of unfunded capital improvement projects. So I'm getting to the point now where, you have to ask yourself, do we know where the hell we're going? And maybe it's time that we stop and maybe actually require that the GMH sits down. I don't even know if they have a master plan. And take a look at what needs to be, renovated and expanded and kind of gives us that clear direction. Then we can probably really put our finger and then start prioritizing, after the labor and delivery ward, where do we go next? So now that they took out the dialysis, I don't know what it's being used for, but my whole point is that it seems like we're, just rushing through the dark here, and whoever speaks up the loudest, that's the one that gets the attention, and that's fine. I certainly respect Dr. Shea, a lot. And I don't doubt that he says that we need to renovate that 25-year-old labor and delivery room, but what else do we need to do? Where do we go from here? Or what's the flavor of the day next week? So I'm really concerned, and everybody says $7 million or give us $4 million. We'll make do with that. And I think everybody's in denial. We're just doing piecemeal work here, Band-Aids. And so if I certainly will support this bill, we know even without a master plan that a renovated labor and delivery room is needed. And if $4 million, $7 million is needed, then fine. I will support that. But I will certainly, I think that support is going to be contingent upon putting a provision in here that, okay, fine, here's $7 million, go start with a renovation of that particular ward, but then you will also develop a master plan, an updated master plan, so that we all know what direction we are heading to in the renovation of our hospital. So I do have concerns about, do we really know where we're going? The second concern, so we just pull out 2 million, 4, 7, now it's 12. And I don't know that the question has been answered as to what's the revenue source to be able to make debt service. On page 2 of the fiscal note, on on the fourth paragraph, last line of the fourth paragraph, BBMR says, Bill 393-32 identifies a non-viable fund source for repayment. So, what the heck? I'll up the ante to 15 million. 15 million once, 15 million twice. What are we doing here? Do I sound frustrated? Yes. Am I frustrated? Yes. I hope I got my point across.
Loud and clear. Senator Dueñas.
Sijus Masi, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to rise. And first of all, state on Bill 393, I certainly have listened to the opening remarks of my good colleague, Senator Yamashita, and the very passionate discourse of the issues surrounding our labor and delivery ward. You know, Mr. Speaker, during the budget process and talks, it was certainly, as time went by and we emerged to discuss the final version of the budget, I actually felt bad for you for a little while, Mr. Speaker. With all the bombardment, with all of the action moving forward and the push, which is good. I mean, because I think the two retiring speakers expressed as well the full understanding of the need. But then, Mr. Speaker, our chairman on health conducted a oversight hearing on a bunch of general topics. And the issue came up. The chief planner was brought up, and discussions commenced. And the retiring speaker, the good senator from Manila, is correct. It was a number of $49 million that was put out of 3 to 4 completely outdated wards. And I believe the 4th floor, a certain amount of space, just completely not being used. And so questions were posed about the master plan, about the ideas, about even the discussion of a new hospital, perhaps. So I guess I just rise to express the same concerns. And I'll close with this. I had the unfortunate experience of having to spend several days in the ICU, a beautiful ward, unfortunately for the opposite end of the birth and labor ward. Most people there are in quite dire straits. But I was talking to the nursing staff, and they talked about how they all had a stake in designing that ward. And they talked about the panels and all the way the layout was and how well it works and how well it functions. Because that wasn't a hastily put together idea under the pressures, I don't think, of the environment. So I'll continue to listen, but I'll continue to also ask the same questions as the two retiring colleagues. And where the bill ends up and what amount ends up being appropriated, I certainly hope that that same care and that same desire around architect and engineering is placed around this effort and is done in consideration, Mr. Speaker, of the whole encompassing issues that face our hospital, notwithstanding what stage of care is to be provided. And so if there's anything I think that we walk away from when we move to finally vote on what the final product is here, I would hope, and I think the people would understand, that the caution and the care to have a product that thoroughly takes into consideration planning and doesn't grow in a matter of days just by numbers flying all over the place. I think that's sometimes when we have our oversights, that's what happens. You've heard that presentation, sometimes regardless of who is making the presentation. So with those concerns, Mr. Speaker, I certainly will be supportive of the final product, but I'm glad this dialogue is going on to put it in true perspective. Si Diyos masi, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator Duenas. If I might, I just noticed that Adelup has transmitted the testimony of Gita. So if everybody would look at their iPads, it's been sent to many of us, And if not, I'll have it printed from here for everybody to have a copy. It addresses many of the concerns that some of you have brought up and may answer what Adelup might be doing with this bill if we send it to them in the current condition. We'll take a short recess. No, Mana just sent something just now. No. Yes. objection, we'll set 393 aside for right now and go back and try to clean up some of the other bills. We'll go back to the beginning, 284, Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we circulated a amendment that I believe really takes into consideration some of the concerns that were raised in the appointment of the medical director. And so at this point, I'd like to move this amendment, but just make a small amendment to the amendment. On line 4, we're on Bill 284.
284. There's an amendment that was just circulated this afternoon by Senator Rodriguez. It's an amendment to Bill 284. It has section 3109 on the top, medical director establishment. Can the staff please make sure that all senators have a copy of the amendment by Senator Rodriguez? Senators, please indicate if you don't have a copy of it so that the staff can provide you. Okay, everybody has a copy. Senator Rodriguez. Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. And so again, what this amendment does is just really clarify how the appointment process will take place and who will be appointed, who can be appointed to serve as a medical director on a collateral, taking up collateral duties as a medical director. And so on the fourth, it's not numbered and I apologize, 1, 2, 3, 4, on the fourth line, just amendment to the amendment, it currently reads, the medical director should preferably be a physician specialist. So it should read, we're going to rearrange, the medical director should be a physician specialist, preferably, and that's where we're going to put preferably, in a field of practice or multiple specialties, and so on and so forth. So as you know, the sentence above is clear that the director shall appoint one of the existing classified physician specialists. And so what this one does here is just saying that it is a physician specialist, but preferably in the field of practice of multiple specialties.
Does everybody understand that amendment? The amendment is to move preferably to after B. Should be a physician, preferably. Hold on, just a sec.
Preferably after specialist.
Yes.
This would actually be an amendment.
We left 284, we were with Senator Snickles. So we'll go back to Senator Snickles. You had an amendment on the floor that.
Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Speaker. With respect to Bill 284, I'd like to withdraw my amendment. We've reconciled it with the author, and he does have a final version to present to the body.
All right, so the Snickles amendment has been withdrawn, and now we have the Rodriguez amendment. And there's an amendment. Okay. Continue, Senator.
Okay.
I apologize.
That's about it, Mr. Speaker. And so again, I asked my colleagues for their support on this amendment.
Any senator wish to be heard on this Rodriguez amendment to Bill 284? There being no objection. On the bill, on the main motion, any other senator wish to be heard on 284? If not on the motion, to send the bill down to the voting file, any objection? Bill 287. Okay, well then we'll just hold that. 294, Senator Rodriguez. Yes, on 294 also, when we set it aside, it was on an amendment proffered by Senator Nicholas. Where are we on that?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On 294, we did have an amendment. Okay. I believe it needs to be circulated. It's a new amendment, not the original amendment. It reconciles issues that were brought up also by our majority leader.
All right, we'll take a few minutes. The legislature's back in. Senator Rodriguez, we're on Bill 294, and I believe the amendment is being proffered by Senator Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, the amendment has been circulated to all members of the body with respect to that subsection 1 on page 3. And basically what the amendment seeks to do is it limits the increase of the fees. So the fees won't be able to go up every 2 years just by the director raising it. The maximum that they'll be able to go up to is up to 10%. Anything above 10% will require going through the administrative adjudication law. The director may raise it or lower it within a range of 10%, but if it exceeds 10%, it needs to go through the AAA process. So that's how it's different from the original language. The original language has it so that the director can increase the fee every 2 years by 10% in perpetuity. This limits it to a one-time increase, and anything after that is going to require the AAA process, Mr. Speaker.
Okay.
The version that we're talking about is
can you withdraw your first one?
the first one is withdrawn, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, clerks, the first St. Nicholas Amendment has been withdrawn, and we're now on the second one from today.
The second one has the M. St. Nicholas on it. That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, on the M. St. Nicholas Amendment. Please, Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there's really two parts to this amendment. The second part, I'll reference the second part first, where we make it clear here is that when we're giving now the authority to the department to give them the flexibility to empower them to be able to look at these fees every 2 years, that they would have the flexibility to make the adjustments, whether it's increase or decrease within 10%, and they can do it on their own. They would have to, and this is where the amendment comes in, which I think is good, is that they would have to give notice to the public, give notice to this body as to the intended increase or decrease of this amount. However, the first part here where we are now limiting it to, where it says to exceed a capped increase of 10% of the fee on December 31st, 2014. So really what we're saying, and this is only a one-time shot, is that we're giving you, the authority, the flexibility, but then you can only do it one time. And so it really, I think that's the only issue I would have with this amendment, is that, I think if you even take a look at the testimony of the department, sure, they have concern that, we're taking this money that we're saying was always going to go to them, but they never knew that they were collecting it. They have a concern of that, but the second part is one of the things, the positive aspects of this bill to them is that we're giving them that authority, that flexibility, and really 10%, sure, it's an increase, but it's every 2 years. It's just giving them the ability to, reassess what what is needed, and if the service stations need to have this adjustments, whether it's up or down, I think, to be able to just make our government work more smoothly, where we don't put too much impediments, in front of them. I think this is a start in that direction. And so, I would just move to delete where it says to exceed a capped increase of 10% of the fee on December 31st, and leave the original language on. So that would be my amendment, Mr. Speaker, to delete that first section of the amendment.
Senator Limtiaco.
Mr. Speaker, I'm just a tad confused at the language in the initial bill. The language reads, may increase or decrease the fee by an amount not greater or less than 10%. And the way I read that, it can't be any number other than 10%. Not greater or less than 10%. So, the language in itself is a little confusing, because you can't have any other number than 10%. But having said that, the language further goes on to say any proposed increase in excess of 10%, but the previous two sentences doesn't allow for an increase of more than 10% or less than. It's just 10%. So if the author would yield to a question as to what was the true intent of the language, so we can understand where the direction we are supposed to go in.
Senator Rodriguez, do you yield?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The intent is right now, it's $15. The safety inspection set by statute is $15. If you want to change it, you got to go through the legislature to make that change. There's not even a structure where you have the department goes through the AAA, right? And so what we're saying here is that if they want to increase it, let's say by 10%, which would be about $1.50, right? Or if they want to do up to $1.50, then they could. But if they want to do it $1.55, then they must go through that AAA process. If they want to decrease it by $1.50, they could. If they want to increase it by 75 cents, then they could. They have that ability to do it. That's the intent. And so I don't know if that would make it clearer for our colleague, but that was the intent of this provision.
Senator Lim Tiaco, does that satisfy your inquiry?
It does. But the language doesn't. It still doesn't make sense. And I understand the intent. So all we need to do is just change the language such that, because I think if the intent is to, if you're going to do it above 10%, you have to go through the shall require the director to conduct the rate review and adoption process through the AAA process. Okay, so that's clear. But the preceding language should just be removed altogether. And that would allow the director to move up to that 10%, but if anything greater than that, they have to go through the AAA process. But the language as it reads now basically pegs it at only 10%, not greater or less than 10%, which is, it has to be 10%. And I don't think that was the intent of it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Madam Speaker?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I mean, I was trying to understand, of course, the argument, but the only thing in which, of course, makes some sense to me is that maybe what we should do in line 2 is just to say that may increase up to 10%. That means it can be 10 cents, and then 50 cents, and then later, and all that time, you don't need to come here. But definitely, to go beyond that, I agree with the previous speaker, then you're right, they might have to come here, and only up until December 31st. So giving that leverage then, which is, yes, up or down, but I really don't see them coming down. I see them more going up to gradually increase it, but definitely the cap is 10%. And that, I think, is the simplest way to say this then, is just to say that every 2 years thereafter review the safety inspection fee and may increase up to 10% of the fee on December 31, 2014. I mean, it's sometimes, the simplest words we use makes it a lot better than, because greater or less to me, because normally when you say, at least in math, is greater than or equal to, but you don't do greater and then less. I'm not a mathematician, but I just never see it that way mathematically.
Just point of order, Mr. Speaker. The amendment addresses the confusion between the greater or less than language, and we're supposed to be debating the amendment that's proposed. And the amendment already strikes out the greater or less than language, and it just says to exceed a capped increase of 10%. So they can increase or decrease the fee by any amount, but they can't go over 10% of the amount of the fee on December 31st, 2014. If they do go over that amount, then they have to go through the AAA process. That's what the amendment is being proffered. I do believe that the author of the bill made a motion to delete a portion of this amendment, and I think that we should be entertaining the motion made by the author at this time.
And if I may, Mr. Speaker, if I could just, now that it's even more clear, maybe withdraw my amendment, because I like to just make my amendment more clear, if I could.
Okay. Do we have, are we going to be able to resolve this now? Or?
Yeah, so, Mr. Speaker, what I intend to do is just, which Senator Sinickas is right, we just leave the language of an amount not to exceed a cap increase of 10%, period. And my amendment would just be to delete the December 31st, 2014 language. To the amendment or withdraw mine and just make it clean and just,
All right.
but I think
The motion to withdraw your initial amendment. All right. And so now you have a new amendment to strike December 31st, 2014.
of the fee on December 31st, 2014, that's correct, and the period would be after 10%. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that it just still gives them the flexibility moving forward, not just a one-time, because leaving it at this date, leaving that language there would just make it a one-time adjustment.
All right. The Rodriguez amendment is to put a period after 10% and strike the underlined words of the fee on December 31st, 2014. Senator St. Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a point of inquiry then, because the reason why we pegged it to December 31st, 2014 was so that the fee will never go higher than 10% of that fee on that day, the fee of whatever it was on that day. If we allow for the fee to increase by 10%, and then we allow the other language to remain as well, that the fee may continue to be increased by 10% every 2 years, then what we're talking about is a perpetuitous fee increase of 10% compounded every 2 years. And that was the reason why I wanted to limit it to December 31st, 2014, because I'm okay with it going up once, but for us to open the door for it to keep going up on top of each other at a compounded rate every 2 years, you know, that's where I have difficulty. And so I wanted to inquire with the mover of the amendment to the amendment, is the intent to leave the door open for 10% increases to constantly compound every 2 years? Is that the reason why we're striking the December 31st, 2014?
Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, that's, you know, the intent, as I said earlier, really is to give the flexibility to the departments, you know, to the departments to be able to make these adjustments. And that's why when, you know, with the second part of this amendment where it's, you know, we're requiring them to give public notice, to even notice this body here, that in the future, if this body sees that, hey, you know, this is going to, you know, in a direction where we don't want it, where it's too much, then this body can easily, just like it has done for other matters, stop that. And so I think, you know, we just need to be able to have the trust in our departments and be able to break down the barriers that are in front of our departments now in really ensuring that they deliver smooth operations and providing service for our community.
I understand trust, but his question was it your intent to allow them to compound at 10% every 2 years?
No, that's not the, you know, that's not the intent.
And the amendment striking December 31st, 2014, would that fulfill your intent, or would that fulfill his concerns? We'll take a short recess. on. We're back on. And Senator Rodriguez, do I understand you withdrawing your amendment?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, just, for the purpose of moving forward and not jeopardizing the real intent of this police officer submitted piece of legislation, I withdraw the amendment.
All right. So on the main M. Nicholas amendment, Senator Tom Adda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the intent here was to provide the director the authority to adjust the rates. But in reality, why would he even think about decreasing the fees? We've been arguing about, well, how much can he increase it, but we got language in here that he may increase or decrease. So really, it seems that what we're talking about is that giving the director the authority to increase the fees by an amount not greater than 10%. And I think there was probably too many words in there that kind of got us a little confused. He may increase it or he may decrease it. So I would like to make an amendment to say on line 2 there that it would read, thereafter review the safety inspection fee and may increase the fee by an amount not to exceed 10%. Off the fee, and then reads on and on and on. I mean, in reality, he's not going to go in there and adjust it downwards. So that would be my amendment to kind of clear that up a little bit. So the amendment then would be on the second line to delete the word or decrease. And then that's it. Just leave everything as is. Not to exceed 10%. Yeah, remove the words a capped increase of. And so I just say an amount not to exceed 10%. Huh? Yeah. But I'm just talking about the third line.
All right, hold on. Let's just take a short break. Senator Tom Adda, you had an amendment, and have we resolved it?
Well, the author, the mover of the amendment, of the main amendment, has no objection to the amendment that I made.
So your amendment is to strike or decrease?
To strike or decrease, and on the third line to strike the phrase a capped increase, so that then you read an amount not to exceed 10%. So then the thought is he may increase the fee by an amount not to exceed 10%.
So or decrease is struck and a capped is struck.
Correct. A capped increase off.
All right.
Well, then that's gonna, and then we need to go down and to make it consistent. Further down, it talks about the director shall cause a notice describing the original fee and the increase or decrease to be published. So remove the word to or decrease.
Clerks get that? All right. Any other amendment?
Okay, I think we're good.
On the amendments by Senator Tom Adda, any senator wish to be heard? Any objection to the amendments? On the main bill, on the main motion, Senator Limtiaco, Tom Adda, and then Senator Limtiaco. Oh, I'm sorry. On the M. Nicholas amendment, any objection with the amendments? On the main motion, Senator Tom Adda, and then Senator Limtiaco.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think, you know, as I was quickly reading through the findings and intent, I think the intent of Bill 294 was actually to identify a funding source to be able to procure vehicles and to maintain these vehicles. But in the language on page, oh, I'm sorry, here. On page 4, down on line 22, it says purpose. The primary and sole purpose of the fund is the acquisition of vehicles and requisite associated equipment, and to support the repair and maintenance needs for vehicles of the Guam Police Department. But as we go further down on line 3 there, paragraph C, says authorize expenditure and continuing appropriation. And it talks about there on line 9, it says not less than 33% of the annual revenue collected by the fund shall be used solely for the purchase of new police patrol vehicles, etc. Okay, so we've earmarked what 33% of these funds are going to be used for. But then it kind of leaves it open. It can be used, the Guam Police Department may expend a portion of the fund to subsidize the utilization of privately owned vehicles for police service. I understand that GPD does have a program where I'm a police officer, I can go out and lease you know, a Chevy Camaro or whatever and put a blue light on it like they do in Hawaii, and then the department's supposed to be reimbursed. I guess that's what that's for. Or I guess those funds could probably be used for security vehicles for the governor. And then thirdly, the Guam Police Department may expend a portion of the fund to pursue the collection of just compensation from parties responsible for damages. But it doesn't say anywhere that then we will earmark a certain amount of these funds to maintain the vehicles. And I think that the biggest challenge that the department has is maintaining these vehicles. Just having the funds available to change out the tires, the oil, and make the necessary repairs to the vehicle. So, if I think that probably we would need to amend this so that we'll keep that the authorized expenditure, that not less than 33%, or for that matter, we're going to earmark 33% of these funds. And we're not talking about nickels and dimes here. We're talking about, I believe, just the $3 set aside. You multiply that times, I believe we have about 70,000 vehicles on island. So if you collect $3 from each of those 70,000 vehicles, who's the mathematician? Is that 2.1 million or 210,000? We're not talking about chump change here. So So we're going to put aside 33% to acquire new vehicles. And then on top of that, we normally get compact impact funds to purchase additional vehicles. But after that, we don't have enough money to maintain these things other than to put gas in it. So I think we need to, there needs to be, major amendment to be made on subparagraph C here so that it is clear 33% goes towards purchasing new vehicles. The remaining 67% shall be for the repair and maintenance of police vehicles. And that's going to take a little bit of reworking here because actually we can take, like for example, paragraph C2, that could be a part of, that could be made III of C1, and then the new number 2 will be worded to the, I'll have to sit down and write the amendment for that, but that is what I propose, how we amend this thing, make it very clear that we're earmarking specific amounts or specific proportion for the repair and maintenance of vehicles in addition to. So I would like to return to proffer an amendment for paragraph C here.
All right, any other senator wish to be heard on the main motion? Senator Limtiaco.
Mr. Speaker, is it on the amendment or on the main motion?
On the main motion.
Okay.
Well, yes, Senator Ada will be proposing an amendment, but if you want to speak on the main.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My concerns are in regards to a conversation that I had with the author, and the effective date on the bill, on the last page of the bill, is reads, the act shall become immediately effective. And my concern is that if we're going to, this money was supposed to at one point in time, and if I'm not mistaken, on page 3, it specifically says, as written, all fees received by the Department of Revenue and Taxation shall be deposited in the general fund of the Treasury of Guam. I know that the fee was supposed to go to Rev and Tax, but if I'm not mistaken, it was being deposited into the general fund. And based on the budget that we passed, we've already appropriated all of that money. So where are we taking the money from in order to fund this? So if the author would yield to the question as to, there needs to be on the general ledger, there needs to be a minus this amount if we're going to take it and start appropriating it to this special fund, because we've already appropriated the money in the budget.
Thank you. Do you yield, Senator Rodriguez?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And we're starting to discuss this with Senator Limtiaco. And so, as I shared yesterday when we did the introduction of this bill, is that this $3 that has been is being collected every month by Department of Revenue and Taxation Motor Vehicle Division is an amount that is paid by the service stations. $3 are being paid by service stations, which is taken from the $15 of safety inspections. And so no one, DOA, BBMR, even Rev and Tax, didn't know that this amount was actually being taken in by the department and being deposited into the general fund. And so, at that point, when we did bring it to the attention, then it was verified by these same entities that yes, this is real money that's that is available. And so when we ask now, we've passed the budget for this fiscal year, but when we pass that budget, when we say we're gonna spend $100 million, we're appropriating $100 million, we say where this $100 million is coming from. We say X amount is coming from GRT, X amount is coming from all these special funds, the environmental fund, all these special funds. We know the money is coming in from there. That's what makes up that $100 million. I'm giving an example. It's not $100 million, right? I mean, it's more than that. So that's where that's where that 100 million is coming from. And so I don't believe that this, that this, what we are designating now to go to the special account is going to be taken from any of those, because it's not accounted for in the annual budget. It's never been accounted for. And so
Okay.
Senator Limtiaco.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just find that extremely hard to believe and digest, because, you know, we want to make sure that obviously these monies have been being deposited for some time. So if that amount is correct, and it could potentially account for $250,000 a year, are you telling me that we have several $1,000,000 laying somewhere that we haven't appropriated? Because I find it extremely hard to believe that neither body would have figured out that there's money to be appropriated. And so my concern is that we've already appropriated this money. Now, if we want to go back and and change the budget and take the money from where we've already appropriated and appropriate it to this particular bill, fine. But let's not be naive enough to say that, oh, there's money out there somewhere, we can just go ahead and appropriate it, because that's not fiscally responsible, and it's definitely inaccurate.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, point of information, if I direct my good colleague to the committee report and look at the fiscal note, the fiscal note is attached to this committee report, and it says the one category here, estimated fiscal impact of bill, and the amount is 0. And so I was the same way when we discovered that this is, you know, how can we be collecting money? No one knows about it. Where's this money going? And so that's, you know, that's the same position that I was in when we discovered that this is actually money that was being collected and not being accounted for.
And so just another question for the author. What was the fiscal note presented before or after they made the determination that they were unaware of the money? Because that timing would make a difference. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Once again, I voiced my concerns that we've just gone through the budget cycle. We've appropriated all the funds that not only the administration, BBMR, DOA, as well as the committee that you chair, Mr. Speaker, and they've identified all the funds available for appropriation and have done so for the last several budget cycles. So I'm concerned in the fact that there's this ghost amount of money out there that has been lingering and would have amounted to several $1,000,000 over the course of the last 10 years, and that amount of money would, you know, although money seems to just kind of appear everywhere these last couple of years, I still find it a little difficult to believe, and I just want to make sure that we do our due diligence to identify if those funds exist. So maybe, and I hate to put this bill aside because we've put so many aside already, but can we get a confirmation from the Appropriations Committee to determine whether or not, in fact, this money does exist? Would the author yield to that at least that research to identify it, so we can move forward on the bill?
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would yield. Yes, again, if you just reference back the fiscal note, you'll have the information listed there, that this money does exist, and that as of fiscal year 2013, the revenue that was received was about $295,629.
So where is the preceding year's $295,000 collections? Because I'd like to appropriate that to something in a bill of itself. Because if we just identified the $295 that exists for this bill, where's the preceding years? Because that's a lot of money. Let's.
Yes, and Mr. Speaker, I think that's a question that needs to be asked. But I think it's totally separate from what this bill is. I mean, we rely heavily on this fiscal note.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We're going to have to ask the administration what happened to that amount of money, because we did appropriate money in fees and licenses, and on the special funds, they're all broken down there. And
thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
I do apologize, Mr. Speaker, but as I'm looking at this and the creation of this, I do know that based on the presentation from Marie Benito from Revenue and Taxation, if this fund were to be created, the Department of Revenue and Taxation, that $3 was supposed to be going to them as we speak, but yet was being deposited into the federal funds, and that was, into the general fund, but that was an oversight on their part, and they wanted to see that corrected. My take is, if this legislation were passed, then the discrepancy that has been stated by the Deputy of Revenue and Taxation means they will not receive anything, even those prior to that have been received. Am I saying that correct? Because based on the 2014 funds, there's 297,000. And based on the previous years, based on the implementation of this, there were special funds. And I don't have the accounting here, but if we haven't appropriated that, then I'm thinking just for the prior fiscal years before 2014, that there will be additional funds. And I'm gonna have my staff track it right now to see where it's at. So I just wanted to see if it has been an error and an oversight from the Department of Revenue and Taxation's part, then how do I reconcile to at least give proportionate to both Revenue and Taxation for policing it, and then creating the special account for these vehicles and funding? So it's a win-win for both GPD and Revenue and Taxation. That's my concern.
Thank you. Senator Ada, are you prepared with your amendment?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared, but I don't have it in writing, but it's really pretty easy.
Let's try and let's see.
Okay, so starting on line 9, my first amendment is to delete the words "not less than." So if you leave the word "not less than," that means then that you have to allocate 33%, but you can actually allocate more than that. So I think what the amendment I want to make is that 30% is going to be allocated for the purchase of new vehicles, 70% be allocated for the maintenance of vehicles. So so then line 9 will read 30% of the annual revenue collected by the fund shall be used solely for the purchase of new vehicles, and everything reads as put there. So the only change I made is I deleted "not less than," made the allocation 30%. Then,
Let's take them individually.
all right,
On that amendment, Senator Rodriguez or any senator who wishes to speak on the amendment just proffered by Senator Tom Ada on deletion of that "not less than"? No objection?
okay. So
Your
we
next
go
one.
down to line 19, and I propose that we change that subparagraph 2 and make that a triple I. So I, on line 13, that's the first kind of, parameter, and then, so there's 3 parameters to that 30% allocation. So then line 19, we change that designation to a triple I instead and delete 2. Then,
Hold on.
okay,
On that amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a technical. On line 22, it says pursuant to 10 GCA Chapter 65. That needs to be corrected to Chapter 56, and that is where this provision is found in the statute.
Does that help, Senator Ada, or
no, it's fine.
no? You still want the triple
That's
I?
right. I'm still tightening up how that 30%
All right.
allocation is to be spent.
Okay, on the amendment by Senator Ada to add the triple I to and delete 2.
On line 19.
Any senator?
Okay. Now, I propose that we add a new subparagraph 2, and it would read as follows. And the way the phrase will go is the same as what we see there on line 9. It will read 70% of the annual revenue collected by the fund shall be used solely for the repair and maintenance of police patrol vehicles within the government of Guam. So if you just take that line 9 through 12, the only change we make there is the allocation, and it'll be 70%. And then the second line will be for repair and maintenance of police patrol vehicles.
Does everybody understand that amendment? Any objection?
And the final amendment that I propose is on line 23 to line 25. That particular section or subparagraph proposes that we're going to allocate funds for GPD to go after, to go into the collection service. I say, never mind that. Let the police do police work. Let DOE go do collections. So I propose that we delete lines 23 through 25. Huh? No. I'm just saying, let's not get GPD into the debt collection business. So
Any objection to the deletion of lines 23 to 25 as moved by Senator Tom Adams?
that's it, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Senator Munya Barnes.
Jesus Masi, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I do have a proposed amendment, and just based on the information received and reading the testimony from the Guam Police Department's Chief Fred Berdaliu, who spoke in support of Bill 294-32, he noted in his last paragraph, and he said, lastly, information brought to our attention was that the Department of Revenue and Taxation has relied on this funding source. Thus, in the spirit of cooperation and a concerted effort from the Department of Revenue and Taxation, the Guam Police Department is receptive to the revenue sharing as this funding source is realized. This joint benefit will certainly demonstrate a cohesive partnership as our agencies strive to improve upon its services to the community. And it says, thank you for giving us the opportunity to provide comments on this bill. And Mr. Speaker, so based on that, and based on the BBMR's fiscal note submission and the safety inspection fee collection to date, just for fiscal year 2012 was $297,143, and then for fiscal year 2013 it was $295,629. That's over $500,000. I want to be able to, in the spirit of working together with both government agencies, is to split it in half and share that portion equally, because I do know, and maybe include, as I'm asking legal to work the amendment out, is that any prior year before 2012 that has been received and not accounted for, that also be divided up equally. So just asking for either a 30-second recess or at least enough time for legal counsel to provide that amendment.
Okay. On the proposed amendment by Senator Tina Munya Barnes, Senator Rodriguez, and then Senator Duenas. Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I completely understand where the retiring speaker is coming from, but I really think it's a step backwards. It's a step backwards in what we're trying to achieve here, and which is to designate a funding source that is solely for GPD's police patrol vehicles, their maintenance, and just to provide them the tools necessary to keep our community safe. And yes, I know there's heartaches, absolutely. When you find out that, you're supposed to be collecting on this money and it's used for you, but you haven't been collecting on it, and now that you know that money was there, it's hard. It breaks your heart, no doubt. But I've talked with the Department of Revenue and Taxation, and looking at other ways to ensure we get some funding there. I mean, this body has passed legislation that would provide them a huge amount of resources for their ABC branch to get funds there for their enforcement. To this date, things haven't been moving. And so this body looks at the departments and not trying to pit one against the other, but looks at ways to get them, resources. And so one alternative to this was that we said, okay, we had this recent law that allowed dealers to be able to renew or to apply for registration that's good for, I believe, 2 or 3 years, and that you wouldn't have to renew it. The dealers would have to do is pay $30. But Mr. Speaker, I've been speaking to many people that I know personally that said they bought a new vehicle, and when that 1 year comes around, they're back up, getting a safety inspection, renewing their vehicle registration, paying that safety inspection fee again, when the law already says that the dealer is supposed to have paid that $30, and that money is already allocated. Some of it goes to the Better Service Government Fund. And so I said, look, you guys are not doing it. You guys are not looking out for this. Maybe that could be a way to say, okay, let's take some of that revenue and bring it back to that division of Rev and Tax. So there's ways that we're looking at being able to provide resources to the department, more specifically to the motor vehicle division. And so I just really feel that this amendment is just really it's a step backwards, and it's really setting up this at least the impression that we're trying to pit one against the other, which really which is not the intent, I'm sure, but the perception is there. And so I respectfully object to the amendment.
On the Munoz-Barnes amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm the chairman of Rev and Tax, and I've never had any communications regarding this from the director or the deputy director concerning these funds. The proposal to put the money into our police department makes perfect sense to me. We need police cars on the streets. We need to fix those police cars. We hear all the time about the needs of the police department. We've even had the very same chief who's saying, I want to share this money, also testify in a hearing, and based on our line of questioning, reveal the fact that he's going to be increasing the number of officers he has and not proportionally increasing the supplies budget that he has. So I'm not quite sure where the logic comes from on the police department side from the chief saying that he has these resources to share. I think that we need to focus these resources on public safety. We need to understand that we just passed a budget, that Rev and Tax got an increase in their budget, and if they need more funds to get their mission done, they need to put that request into their budget. But to say that we have this new money and we're going to split it, I don't even know where that money is going to go to Rev and Tax. And I'm the chairman. Now, if Rev and Tax needs more funds, they need to communicate that, and we need to address that when the funds become available. But just because there's this fee that they haven't been collecting over the years, now all of a sudden they want to start getting a cut of it at the expense of public safety and police cars and repairing them. This body needs to prioritize health, education, and public safety always. Now, the agency has been performing very well up at Rev and Tax. I'm very proud of them. I get comments all the time now that things are moving faster and efficiencies are very much improving. I'm also getting some frustrations, but they're healthy kinds of frustrations of how things are being held to account, where people who are going in to renew their business licenses are now being held to account to file their necessary returns. Those are all very good things, and Rev and Tax is moving in the right direction, and I'm very proud of them. That being said, this new funding source was not allocated in their budget. They got an increase in their budget, and so Rev and Tax has what they need to operate for this fiscal year. To now all of a sudden say we're going to go and split this $290,000 into $145,000, half to the police department and half to Rev and Tax. Well, let's look at the math. 145 at 30% means that we're appropriating what? $42,000 for one car and the other $80,000, $90,000 for repairs. We need to get that money into GPD. Public safety is suffering as it is. We see all the time on the newspaper and on the media about how there's crimes that are happening and we need more patrol cars. I've heard some stories from police officers about how we have only one patrol car for the entire South. We're lucky if we have 3 in the North on a particular beat. Now, I support my agencies, absolutely, but we got them what they needed for this fiscal year. Let's not make this be about, oh, you know, I want to share or what. We got to prioritize. And right now, the police department, the police cars and repairing those cars is absolutely the priority. So I also object to this amendment, and I'm the chair of Revenue Tax. And if Revenue Tax needs more resources, please communicate it to the chair, and we'll make sure that we find those resources as they become available. But at this time, I'm staring in the face of a public safety crisis in our community that needs patrol cars and needs those cars to get fixed. And we're going to get this revenue that hasn't been accounted for into that resource to get those cars fixed the way we want them to. So I support the objection to the amendment, and I think that we need to get this money into the police department right away, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak on the Munya-Barnes amendment? There's been an objection to the amendment. All those in, do you wish to close? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have no qualms saying that GPD needs those cars and we need to protect our community. But on the same measure, the Department of Revenue and Taxation is the arm that collects and polices all the resources that need to come so that the government of Guam can provide for the services. And I'm not going on a whiff that because they didn't ask me. They did admit that it was an oversight. And in the spirit of cooperation and working closely, because this was identified to them, we, Mr. Speaker, know that even as we speak today, we have been able to create new legislation based on funding that has been held stagnant in the government of Guam because there were separate funding sources. And I'm not wanting to take away from Department of Revenue and Taxation, who is the collection arm for the government of Guam to provide for the basic services to our people. But I didn't want to take away from Guam Police Department. I said, let's share. Let's make this a win-win. And if the oversight chair doesn't agree with me, I mean, I'm just saying that the Department of Revenue and Taxation has always said to this body that they're in need of equipment, of additional resources, of manpower. I remember not too long ago when a complaint was made that the lines were from Revenue and Taxation were more than an hour waiting in line in every section. And I'm just saying, if this is going to help a little of this is over 500,000 that we found. And that's probably the start of probably previous years that have not been accounted for. And I'm saying, doesn't hurt to share. Gives Revenue and Taxation and give GPD. I'm not taking away. I'm just saying, based on what the chief has shared in this presentation and this committee report, share it because we're the same government of Guam agency. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Point of inquiry, Mr. Speaker. I will stand corrected depending on the answer that I get to this question as the budget chairman. Did Revenue Tax get their budget request that they put in for fiscal year 2015?
Yes.
Was it as much or was it more than what they were asking for?
More.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On the Munya-Barnes amendment, all those in favor, there's been an objection, so all those in favor of the Munya-Barnes amendment, please indicate by raising your right hand. 5, 6, motion fails. Okay. On the main, Senator Duenas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Please.
Mr. Speaker, I certainly rise in support of the intent of Bill 294, as I'm even a co-sponsor. I couldn't help this afternoon but sit here and listen to the dialogue on many different bills that have had their chance at up to bat, set aside, up to bat, set aside, and it's become a fiscal note afternoon. A celebration of fiscal notes. It's even become a fiscal note waiver afternoon. On a potential $22 million to the general fund. We'll talk about that when 362 re-arrives, makes its debut once again. Yesterday, I guess a fiscal note wasn't good enough. So I have to ask the author of the bill to please yield to a question.
State your question.
Is the author of this bill confident with the fiscal note that has been provided for this bill?
Senator Rodriguez, do you yield?
Mr. Speaker, no, I don't, because I know where this is headed down, and I don't yield to the question.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the answer, Mr. Speaker. You don't yield to the question. Okay. Well, thank you. So I guess we don't know if the fiscal note is adequate to support this bill. And maybe the answer to that then is, with all this dialogue and the failure of amendments, the failure to share, is because this fund was going into the general fund. This money was going to the general fund. So, do we now have an unbalanced budget if this bill passes? I think we do, Mr. Speaker. So maybe, Mr. Speaker, let's see, we had a discussion that public safety got more. So this is more for police cars. I guess what I'll do, since there's an unwillingness to yield, then I'll just listen, Mr. Chair, maybe when you come back down as the budget chairman, Mr. Speaker. Because I think that question is going to linger. The fiscal note for 281 was not good enough. Not good enough for the senator from Talafofo. Not good enough for this body. So, I don't know.
Point of personal privilege, Mr. Speaker. I don't know what the speaker is talking about with respect to a fiscal note that wasn't good enough. I've never said that a fiscal note wasn't good enough.
It was represented on this floor yesterday,
I'm very curious
Mr.
as to where he's getting his facts and what exactly his point is with respect to the bill and how his comments are germane to the discussion of whether or not we need to be getting resources to the Guam Police Department.
Very germane, Mr. Chairman. Very germane, Mr. Speaker. Because if we are so technical on this, and we were so technical in this legislature, we have to be consistent. We cannot say that we don't accept the fiscal note for Bill 281. If we play the tape back from yesterday.
Senator Duenas,
yes.
I think that the difference is that in this bill, he says he's taking it from a certain fund. In 281, the legislation read, the Director of Administration shall determine where the money is going to come from.
And it says office affected.
And then-
Office of the governor. Mr. Speaker, very clearly, we can.
And so if we wanted to, then we would amend or budget bill that went into effect today, go to the office of the governor, reduce his appropriation by $350,000, and appropriate it to 281. If you're ready to do that, we'll consider the bill in the morning.
Certainly.
All right,
Certainly.
thank you.
Thank you. So then we will remain, and so then I have your word, Mr. Speaker, that it will be put back on the agenda.
Yes, reduce as it's a certain spot. He's found a source. And it's not left up to the Director of Administration. This body made the determination, we're taking it from this $3 fund.
I will present to the body, Mr. Speaker. I will present
Point
to
of
the
order,
body.
Mr. Speaker. Bill 281 has been referred back to committee.
I understand.
We're discussing
We'll
an
do-
entirely different bill here, and if the individual who is speaking about a bill that's already been referred back to committee doesn't want to let go of that, he needs to address that at the proper time with the proper motions. But the discussion right now is about getting resources to Guam the Police Department, not about sour grapes over a bill going back to committee.
Mr. Chairman, I believe you have the floor. You're
All
in
right,
control here.
We'll deal with that later. Just go ahead, finish up, and let's go. On the bill 294.
I put for the record, I'm offended by the gentleman's statement. So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I will say then, in closing, that there is still a lingering question, regardless of the funding source and the fiscal note, that we may have a potential problem, and I would like for the Office of Finance and Budget to show how this does not unbalance the budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other senator wish to be heard on Bill 294? On the motion, on the main motion, any other senator wish to be heard on the bill? Do you wish to close, Senator Rodriguez? On the motion to send the bill down to voting file? Any objection? We stand in recess until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.